Hello and welcome to the 33rd episode of the Chall podcast, a show dedicated to Call of Duty esports and more specifically the Call of Duty League. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we will be discussing the preseason Kickoff Classic event that took place nearly 2 weeks ago. We will also be giving our thoughts and predictions for the first week of the 2022 Call of Duty League regular season, which begins in just a few days from now. We have some other topics to cover as well today, including the retirement of Aches, one of our favorite players. But first, how are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. Touched on it last time we talked, but feels like it's been a long off season and it's finally coming to a quick end this Friday. Or not a quick end, but it's quickly coming to an end now. So looking forward to it.
It doesn't even really feel like the off season has ended. Well, I guess it technically hasn't, but it doesn't feel like the season is here because the hype isn't really all that hype really so far. So maybe things will change and hopefully they will. But let's just dive right into the show. We have quite a bit to cover, and neither of us really want to be here in an hour and a half or 2 hours. So let's just quickly kind of run through the Kickoff Classic. We did a preview show for a few weeks ago before the event, and we both basically came to the conclusion like we had no idea what was going to happen because a lot of these rosters are different than they were in the 2021 season, and it's also really not a real event because it's a preseason. Control was first played at the Kickoff Classic, and we didn't really have a chance to see anybody play Control before then. So what did you think of the Kickoff Classic as a whole? What are your kind of takeaways from this event?
Yeah, I think that was the main thing. We did that preview show, and then we haven't necessarily dedicated a show to a recap of it because I just felt like, and we kind of talked about it, that it's kind of because of a preseason event. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter in the long haul. So um, it's just something to finally give fans some Vanguard action to watch ahead of this week's start of the official regular season. So I actually thought some of the matches were super entertaining. In terms of takeaway, like you said, the first thing that immediately jumps out is the surge. Their young roster led by Sib and Pred alongside Mac and Accuracy, which for starters, I can't remember who on the broadcast, but I felt like some people were referring to Mac as a veteran, and that just seemed weird to me. Like, this is his third year, and it's not even like he came in MW, and so it wasn't even like a full year there. So it's like his second and a half. It's his third year, but like he's basically played 1.5 years in the pro league. Um, so it's still a relatively young team outside of Accuracy, and I feel like they turned heads at this event. A lot of people um, had high expectations, including myself, had high expectations for Sib, and eyes were on Sib and Pred because, Pred had so much success in amateurs in the APAC region coming over here. Question was if he was going to be able to translate that to success on the big stage. Sib had been a sub for, the Atlanta FaZe. Finally getting his shot in the pro league, would he be able to, replicate his success in the amateur scene on the big stage? And both of them shined in this preseason event. And, we talked about it in our preseason or our preview show of this event. There was the coaches poll done by Breaking Point, GG, and the big like surprise, at least for us or me, was that the coaches had Seattle ranked fourth going into this Kickoff Classic, and this event goes to show you, they've been looking good early in scrims, and that resulted in a second place finish here at the Kickoff Classic. So that the major takeaway for me was they look good. Obviously, Toronto ends up taking the whole thing, and it seemed like they I forget who in particular was talking about it in like the post championship interview, but it seemed like practice wasn't going great for them, and they themselves weren't expecting to win the event, but at the end of the day, that it's that team that stuck together from last year. They have that chemistry from a full year competing together, almost a full year since they replaced Methods with an Insight in stage two. They got a lot of time playing together already, and it's they got on LAN, and it seems like things clicked for them. So they're going to be a dangerous team, and I think the league's looking as competitive as ever. It could be a result of Vanguard, but even regardless of the game playing, it just seems like we're in for a very competitive year in terms of like the talent across all 12 teams in the league.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Seattle part specifically. I mean, we talked about it on the preview show for the Kickoff Classic. Neither one of us were really sure what to expect out of Seattle because of their roster. Sib has been an academy sub or academy player, like in a pro league sub for a few years, but we really hadn't got to see him on the big stage. And Pred has been in the APAC region, and they're basically on an island. Well, they really are on an island, but more metaphorically speaking. But yeah, so Seattle did really well, and I wasn't really expecting that well because they had to go through phase, they had to go through the subliners, and they even gave Toronto a fight. I forget who said it on my timeline. It might have been a former player, but basically they were talking about before the event that Toronto hadn't had a lot of practice. Like you said, they weren't having good practice and they weren't practicing very much because I mean, it's really hard for a lot of these teams because the holidays were just like a month or so ago, and specifically with Toronto, they have a lot of European players. Where if they're going home for the holidays, they're obviously not going to be able to get the practice that another team might if they all stayed in the United States. So it's pretty difficult for them. So I think that bodes well for them that they came out and they beat Florida, the Thieves, and the Surge, who, like I said, looked great throughout the entire event, even with minimal to subpar practice, which is really impressive. Another thing is FaZe. I mean, we've been talking up FaZe for the better part of 2 years, and rightfully so because they're awesome. They went to the grand finals of the first CDL championship, and they ran through pretty much everybody last year and pretty much dominated the entire season and won the world championship. And in this event, they have their one match and they lose to Seattle 3-1. That, like, it might not be fair, but it makes me think that you can't really take away a whole lot from this event because if FaZe is doing poorly and FaZe loses their one match and it's a single elimination, so it's not a one-to-one comparison with like a major where it's a double elimination. But like if FaZe does poorly, how well or how much should we take out of this? Because I fully expect FaZe to be one of, if not the best team again. So, and the same goes for Optic. Optic was predicted to be like the second or third best team, and they also lost to the Thieves in their first match. So we didn't really get to see a lot from the supposedly the best two teams.
Yeah, I think end of the day, preseason event. Not too much we have to take away from it, in terms of like panicking about some of these super teams or
Yeah.
teams like FaZe or Optic. But maybe Seattle is just FaZe's kryptonite because at the Stage 5 major last year, that's where Classic um, turned up in that series, and it was in the same arena, I believe, at the esports arena in Arlington. So that's two straight losses there for FaZe against the Seattle organization. I don't know, maybe that's the formula for success for Seattle. But yeah, jokes aside, I don't think there's any major concerns out of that. It's just Seattle was playing well. I think, I mean, I don't have the scores on hand for that, but I believe Atlanta won. Well, I know Atlanta won map one, and then it was 6-5 in the search for map two. Sib had the 1v1 win against Arcides, I believe, in round 11. So I remember at least, it's not like FaZe got blown out by Seattle or anything like that. Um, so again, end of the day, preseason event. We'll see what happens here when the regular season kicks off later this week. If FaZe struggles in that, then maybe we'll start having some questions. But just like you, I fully expect FaZe to be the juggernaut we all know and expect them to be.
Yeah, let's get into the regular season. We don't really have to spend any more time on the Kickoff Classic, like you said, and like I said, it's kind of hard to really decipher what you know is important from that event. But at least we got to see the teams play each other, how some of these rosters may work as we progress through the season. So let's jump right into week one of the 2022 Call of Duty League regular season, which begins on February 4th, which is Thursday. Or Friday, excuse me. So Friday, February 4th, we have three matches. The first of which is the London Royal Ravens versus the Florida Mutineers, and then we have the Boston Breach versus the Los Angeles not Gladiators, Gorillas. That slipped into my Overwatch League brain. And then the New York Subliners versus the Seattle Surge. So let's start at the top. London versus Florida. Neither of these teams were really expected to do a whole lot this season if you put a lot of weight into the coaches' power rankings because Florida is, I think, one of the bottom four teams, and London is right around there as well. So, who you got for Florida versus London to kick off the league season?
I'm going with Florida. Again, we're not taking too much away from that kickoff classic, but Florida did win their opening series there against the Gorillas, and London got 3-0'd by Seattle. I honestly don't even really remember that opening series between Seattle and London, even though I know I watched it. Um, so I feel like I just got to go with Florida here. But like you said, I think these are two teams that, at least based on early scrim results and expectations, aren't exactly um, expected to be title contenders or anything like that. So this is going to be kind of a match to see where these teams are at early on. And, we got a lot of rookies in this match. Dave Patty, Gizmo, and Nasty. Afro playing in like his first full season to start the year, coming in after last year uh, towards the end of the season, and then Zero making his return after all his trouble last year with visas and stuff like that. So, looking forward to this one. Obviously it's not like a marquee matchup in my opinion, but I think it'll be a good one to get things started and see where both these teams are at early on.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I think Florida takes this. Um, I know there are concerns about how well Florida's roles really fit with each other because of Day Patty and everything. But I also think that Florida has more talent, and especially in the early part of the season where teams are not at their best, they're still kind of forming their chemistry and still kind of getting used to each other and getting used to the game modes, specifically control, since they haven't had a ton of experience playing it. I tend to lean more toward the talent in that case early on. So I'll go with Florida over London to start off the season. Uh, and then next we have Boston versus LAG. Boston, this is their first official CDL match after acquiring the 12th CDL spot from the Chicago/Dallas franchise. And LAG has an entirely new roster built with superstars. If you dropped this roster in like AW or Black Ops 3 or whatever, Black Ops 4, people would be like, "Oh my god, you got Gunless, you have Hook, you have Slasher, you have ASIM," and really they should be a very talented roster. I'm not sure what to really expect out of them, but who do you have winning, Boston or LAG?
This is a tough one. I think I could see it going either way. Um, I think, like you just said, with the talent on paper, that the Gorillas are likely the favorite in this match. It might be, if you're a betting expert or anything, though, it might be more of a pick 'em. So I don't know. In my eyes, I'm viewing LAG as the favorite just based on talent alone, and I think that Boston comes out on top. Um, it might be weird to think of the Gorillas though as a favorite because based on like that preseason coaches poll or whatever, Boston was more highly rated than the Gorillas. I think Boston was like fifth and LAD was eighth or somewhere around there. But that's what we were talking in the preseason show. or the preview show for the Kickoff Classic, that like the point discrepancy between like the 5th through 9th teams in that coaches poll was super close. So this is a match that I expect to go down to the wire. Don't really think it'll be a blowout in either direction, but I'm gonna go with Boston. My only concern is, again, we're not taking too much away from the Kickoff Classic, but I believe, actually, no. Boston might have won game 2 against New York. It went game 5 um, against New York, and they lost like 6-1 or 6-2 in the game 5 to New York. So Search might not necessarily be a strong suit for Boston, but they have looked good in scrims and hard point. And then you look at a team like LAG, they have some really strong slayers and some noteworthy, in particular, respawn hard point players. So I think either way this is going to be a close match, but I'll just go with Boston for the storyline of them winning their first match.
And this is the first disagreement between Bink and Preston for this season. I'm going to go with LAG, kind of in the same vein of the London and Florida series, where I am going to lean toward the talent and I guess maybe the star power for LAG over Boston. Although I do think Boston is pretty good, and I am putting quite a bit of weight into the coaches' power rankings because the coaches have a better idea of the teams and how they're performing relative to the rest of the league than really anybody else, considering they're in the scrims and they're analyzing the game film and everything. But I do think that LAG is they have the more talent on paper, and you would think maybe not early in the season because I think slashers teams that tend to do better as the season progresses, which is natural for a leader to really maybe learn from your mistakes and just get better as the season progresses. But I just have a feeling that the Gorillas will come out on top, but I could be wrong here, and it probably will be close because I think they're pretty evenly matched in terms of like there's no overwhelming sense of confidence in me that LAG will win. Even though I probably should have my LAG stuff on if I'm going to be supporting them. But yeah, so I'll go with LAG over Boston in the second
Yeah,
series of Friday.
you're our longtime listeners of the pod know you're a huge LAG fan, so I'm not surprised you went with them here.
Yeah, we're a pro Paris, pro LAG podcast. But there is that one episode where I really turned my back on LAG, but
Oh yeah.
we're back on good terms now. The last game of Friday, we have the New York Subliners and the Seattle Surge. So Seattle's coming off a really strong performance at the Kickoff Classic, and New York also had a pretty good performance as well, considering they haven't had a lot of practice reportedly, and this is a very interesting roster that they've put out there with a lot of veteran leadership, but also some like raw talent. But that's the way that Clayster and Crimsick seem to like their teams. Who do you got, New York or Seattle?
This is an interesting one. Again, I could see it going either way. It's worth noting that in the Kickoff Classic, Seattle beat New York 3-1. I don't really remember any of the scores for the individual matches, but I feel like it was, it wasn't a blowout really, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, but either way, I don't think we mentioned this before we started talking about these matches, but just as a reminder, if we did, or to let you guys know if we didn't, that these qualifying matches are online. So unlike the Kickoff Classic, which is online, which was on land, these matches before each major are going to be online, which could play a factor into some of the results for these games. I know that's one thing I was thinking about from the last match we were talking about is, Slasher has been very open about his how much he dislikes playing online. Um, so that could be something that comes into play for some of these teams. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be a major factor for any of these matches or this New York Seattle match in particular, but just throwing that out there again because I can't remember if we said it or not. But yeah, I think similar to the last match, I could see this one going either way. But I'm gonna pick Seattle, fully expecting Seattle to let me down and New York come away with a win.
that's how things are supposed to be. I don't remember. I know that Crone put out a tweet kind of detailing where the teams are playing out of. And I know that New York is playing out of Texas, like the
I
Dallas
think they
Fort Worth
both
area.
are.
Okay, so there's really no advantage there. If our listeners are interested, London is playing out of North Carolina. Florida is in Florida. I think like in South Florida, if I'm not mistaken. I believe Boston is playing out of Boston. The whole team. LAG is almost assuredly playing out of Texas because I can't see Slasher being okay playing off the West Coast again after what was it, the Modern Warfare season. So I don't think there's any specific advantage in most of these. Maybe that Boston LAG series is where the online kind of shows because you have an East Coast team versus a Texas team, but I guess we'll see. As for this New York Seattle series, although Seattle had a really good kickoff classic, I'm kind of disregarding a lot of the results there because I'm not sure actually how much to take away from it, like I've said. And New York has more talent. Like Hydra, he he obviously isn't the best player in the league. I think he has the potential to be the best player in the league, especially with guys like Clayster and Crimsix around him. And I'd love to see Neptune just continue to progress because with this team, um, it's like obviously there's a lot of veteran leadership, but I just think that Clayster and Crimsix know how to play the smartest way possible. We saw during the Kickoff Classic that they were routinely outslayed in hardpoint specifically, but they would still win the maps, which is the anti-Optic, where Optic just they kill everybody, but might still lose a hardpoint. I just think that's a really smart way to play because you kind of prey on another team's greediness and like or their greed, and they want to get the kills even when it's maybe not the most beneficial. I think the subliners have that experience, and Hydra is just a natural talent, and I think that they'll end up winning this series against Seattle.
Okay. I can read through the list real quick that
Yeah, go ahead.
Crone tweeted. Optic, LAG, Subliners, and the Surge are all in Texas. FaZe is in Atlanta. Rocker are in Minnesota. The Thieves are in LA. Ultra's in Toronto. Florida is in Florida. Boston's in Boston. The Ravens are in North Carolina. And Paris is unsure, according to Crone.
Maybe in like a dumpster in like I don't know, like Connecticut or something.
Whoa.
Just kidding. Yeah, I don't remember where they were playing out of.
Paris played out of Texas last year.
Okay, I'm assuming they're gonna do the same thing. When I talked to a former Paris player, he said that they were all playing out of the same like very uncomfortable apartment.
Yeah.
So I would assume it's kind of the same deal at the moment. Like I don't see why they would switch things up at this point. So yeah. Let's talk about these Saturday matches. So we have 4 matches on Saturday. This is the long day. Friday and Sunday both have only 3 matches each. On Saturday, we have Atlanta FaZe versus Paris Legion, London Royal Ravens versus Optic Texas, Seattle Surge versus the Toronto Ultra, and the New York Subliners versus the Los Angeles Gorillas. So the big match of the day is obviously Atlanta versus Paris, 2 juggernauts going at it. World title contender versus world title contender. Who do you got, Atlanta or Paris?
Sorry, Mike. Sorry, the Paris is winning champs crew. I'm gonna have to go with the underdog phase here.
Yeah, that's a pretty big shock. I don't know too many people will agree with you on that one, but I am one of them. I think we're both going out on a limb and saying that Atlanta is gonna pull off this incredible upset over Paris. Um, yeah, there's not much else to it.
Yeah.
It's just a stroke of luck if they win. London versus Optic. Optic did not have a great showing at the Kickoff Classic. London, I believe they were 3-0'd by Seattle, so they obviously didn't have a great showing either. But Optic is, I mean, if the power rankings are to be believed by the coaches, they are one of the best teams. And if you looked at the roster, you could also agree that they are probably going to be one of the best teams, considering they have Shotzi, who has been an MVP candidate both of his seasons. They have Scump, who is arguably, well, he's unarguably one of the greatest players of all time. He might be the best player depending on who you are. And they have a lot of great talent. So who do you got? Optic versus London.
I think this is another one similar to the last match here that gonna have to go with the underdog, Optic Texas. I think they pull off a major upset against the powerhouse London Royal Ravens.
It's not as big of an upset as Atlanta beating Paris, but yeah, I do think that Optic beating London would be a shock to many. And I'll agree with you. I think Optic beats London here.
Yeah, all jokes aside, both of these two matches should, like we said when we were talking about the Kickoff Classic, we're not putting too much weight into the poor performance or the one match 0-1 record for those teams in that preseason event. But this is where things start. So we both fully expect FaZe and Optic to come out and show the fans what they're capable of against two teams who, based in almost everybody's opinion, coaches, polls, whatever you want to look at, aren't necessarily like super close in terms of power rankings or talent or however you want to rank them. It's literally FaZe and Optic at the top, Paris and Legion towards the bottom. So it's a pretty big discrepancy between these two teams, at least on paper, and then in the eyes of many in the community. So FaZe and Optic should take care of business here in their first matches of 2022.
Yeah, and I think you would agree. London beating Optic is a much more realistic scenario than Paris beating FaZe, just because, I mean, FaZe is being predicted to be the best team. You don't think so? You don't think that? So you're saying that a FaZe loss to Paris is more likely or less surprising, even though it would be surprising, than a Optic loss to London?
I think a lot of people, all jokes aside, like there were people saying that like Paris was grinding during this early season phase, and they were putting a lot of work in, and I think some people were even saying like they were scrimming on New Year's Day or like during the holidays and stuff. So like I don't think it's like necessarily Paris teams of the past where they kind of threw a squad together and things weren't working out, and then they aren't. It seems different this year, just externally looking at it. That they're grinding and they're trying to prove some doubters wrong. I'm not saying I disagree with your take there, but it's just in my eyes, you got FaZe and Optic 1-2. And then, however you look at it, if you look at 9 through 12 at the bottom of the CDL, Paris and London are both most likely in that 9 to 12 range. So I think either way, it would be a big upset if Paris or London pulled off a win.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't really disagree too much with that because I actually like a lot of the guys on Paris, and
Yeah.
I don't think that, like, as much as we joke around, as much as I may disrespect Paris on a organizational level, I don't think that always translates to the actual team, like the roster that is playing, because they don't deserve like the flack that Paris, the organization, gets, because I mean they have no control over any of that. Like they sign the contracts because they should sign the contracts, because if you want to play in the CDL, you'll sign with anybody, and you should. But yeah, I think, like, I would still say that Paris beating FaZe would be a bigger upset, but that more has to do with FaZe, how much I think of FaZe, really, not as low as I feel about Paris.
That's fair.
So we both agree that FaZe and Optic are our predictions. Then we have the rematch of the Kickoff Classic finals. We have Seattle versus Toronto. We got to see quite a bit of both of these teams. Who do you have, Toronto versus Seattle?
I'm going with Seattle here. Again, I'm picking Seattle and fully expecting them to let me down, and Toronto comes out with the victory. especially because now I will have picked Seattle to go 2-0, so that means they're most likely going to go 0-2, and I'm just going to be wrong. So I'm just embracing it at this point, and I'm going to go with Seattle.
I'm gonna go with Toronto. They surprised me, not only at the Kickoff Classic, but they surprised me at various points last season, and they kept the same roster as they should, coming off of a second place finish at the CDL Championship, and I really just think very highly of this roster and of Marky
Yep.
B and the team that they have built in Toronto. They're just a really solid team that deserves everybody's respect, because they've earned it over the past really 2 seasons, because they surprised quite a few people in the first season as well. So I'll go with Toronto, but this should be one of the best series of the weekend, because both of these teams, at least at the Kickoff Classic, prove that they can play. And then the last match of Saturday, we have New York versus LAG. Both of these teams are going to play the previous day, so we'll kind of get a better feeling for how they're going to play on Friday. But Saturday night, 7:30, New York versus LAG. Who do you have?
I feel like this is one that, like you just mentioned, it's going to rely somewhat on those Friday matches. I could see both of these teams, if they lose on Friday, being tilted and just not performing up to expectations on Saturday. But throwing that out the window and just looking strictly at this match, I'm going to go with New York. Um, it'll definitely be an interesting one in my opinion. Um, should be a good battle between the subs with Hydra and Neptune versus who can ace him. Then you got Clay and Krim going up against Slasher and Gunless. I will say something we didn't really touch on from the Kickoff Classic was because of some of the maps in Vanguard. One of the things we touched on uh, very many episodes ago when we were talking about roster mania and stuff was a question about the flex roll for New York. And you look at a team like LAG, Gunless is just the obvious flex. Like we've seen him do it with all weapons throughout his career, and we've seen Krim do it with multiple weapons in the past with a sub. But I feel like most of his success with a sub came early in his career in like Black Ops 2 Ghost. And he's more of an AR player now. But I feel like Krim had some standout moments in the Kickoff Classic on Bokage in particular while using the MP40. So people questioning like the flex role for New York, who would run like a third sub between Krim and Clay. Seems like Krim is being that guy, and I guess we'll have to see here when the matches really count how everything goes down. But that's just something that came to mind that we were looking at earlier in the off season, and now we're finally getting to see it. But obviously, when we were thinking about it earlier, we didn't really know the maps or how Vanguard was going to play all that. Um, there's teams on Bokage that'll run 4 MP40s just because it's such a small, fast-paced map. So it'll depend on the map set and stuff. Obviously, what we get to see Krim run here, but that flex battle between Krim and Gunless, depending on the map and what's going on, that could be something to keep an eye on for this one in particular. But I'm going with New York here.
It's a good point about Krim and the roles of New York. I will agree with you. I think that New York takes this
Good thing
really.
you aren't wearing your LAG stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll wear the hat. I won't wear the shirt. I don't know. Like a lot of this is just a gut feeling because we don't have enough information really to take in and make like the best and like most informed decisions or whatever. But with New York, I just, I mean, maybe it's just a bias because I really love Clay. Like Clay's my favorite player, and I I rate him and I rate Crimsix very highly in like their in-game intelligence and the way to manipulate the game in their favor. Even Crimsix is not as like I don't want to say physically talented because that's really not the way to put it. But like, I don't think the Gunny is as great as it was when he was in Black Ops 2 and he was, beaming, everybody off of a head glitch. But I think that no matter what, like even if he is not maybe as technically sound as, you know, let's say Shotzi. Like Shotzi's a demon, but like he's so smart that he'll be in the position to make the better play. I so that's how I look at it. I think that the subliners just are, they should be a really smart team, and I obviously really rate JP and Revan as great coaches and great analysts. Like they might be one of the best coaching staffs. So that entire team, their coaching staff, I think highly of them, and I think that they'll come out on top over LAG here. Let's go to the Sunday matches. We have 3 on Sunday: Paris versus Florida, Atlanta versus LAT, and the Minnesota Rocker versus Optic. Let's start up at the top. Paris versus Florida. Florida, so this will be their second match of the weekend after playing the first match of Friday. And then Paris, they play the first match of Saturday. So they might be coming off of wins or losses, depending on how things go. Who do you have, Legion or Mutineers?
I'm not gonna do it. I want to do it, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm
Come
going
on.
Florida.
No, like don't turn your back on Mike like that. Mike is trusting you with his life with this Paris is winning champs. Like I think he's gonna build a Paris crypto coin or something this year. Uh, but
That's
yeah,
Benzie.
yeah, Benzi's like siphoning off money from a children orphanage or something to get this Bitcoin up. I agree with you though. Florida probably beats Paris. Although I don't feel as confidently about this match with Florida, because I mean it's I you know in the past few seasons Florida has been really good and they might be really good this year, but I don't really feel super confidently about it so far. So I'll go with Florida, but it could go either way, obviously.
Yeah.
The next match is Atlanta versus the Los Angeles Thieves. Atlanta, they play Paris in their first match, and the LA Thieves, this is their first match of the CDL season after having a decent showing, beating Optic in the Kickoff Classic. So who do you got, FaZe or the Thieves?
I think this is gonna be a good one. Based off of LIG's performance at the Kickoff Classic, I think there were some question marks heading into the Kickoff Classic for the Thieves. There was like most of the players were like moving to LA and stuff during the holidays and all that. So I don't think they were one of the most practiced teams going into the event, and I think that like affected their stock. But obviously they're a super talented roster, and they did beat Optic. So um, I think this should be a closer match than FaZe's other match against Paris. I'm still gonna go with Atlanta here. Um, I think not similar to what we've done last season. Until Atlanta really gives us a true reason to bet against them, I'm just not gonna pick against them. So going with Atlanta, but I'm expecting this to be a super entertaining series.
Yeah, I was about to say the exact same thing, that Atlanta is Atlanta and their reputation precedes them at this point. And I think I'm going to pick them until things go wrong. And that's not really a knock on the Thieves at all because this roster is incredible. You know, like there are legitimate superstars on this roster. I'm really excited to see how Octane does on a team that shouldn't be like a bottom 4 team the entire season, because we really haven't gotten to see him in a really important match in 2 years, because Seattle's been at the bottom of the standings for most, if not all, of the previous 2 seasons. So hopefully he and the Thieves can kind of do well this season, and we get to see him in those crunch time situations and see how he performs with a good team. But yeah, I still go with FaZe. So they're good. And then the last match of the weekend, we have the Minnesota Rocker in their first match of the CDL season against Optic, who will play London the previous day. So Optic versus Rocker. Maybe we'll see a round 11 clutch again. Who knows? Who do you got, Rocker versus Optic?
Yeah, I feel like this could be a sneaky match here where, Rocker haven't played all week leading up to this point. They will have that first match of Optics on Saturday to do some VOD review on. And similar to what you were saying about New York's coaching staff, I think Minnesota has a strong coaching staff too, especially with the addition of Looney. I've always thought highly of Looney, as one of those IGLs, like a super intelligent player. And although he's not in a head coaching role, I'm excited to see or hear, what kind of impact he has on this Rocker team. Not sure, when we'll hear that or be able to see it or anything, but it's something in particular I'm looking for with the Rocker, as well as, Standy coming into his first full season in the CDL after being picked up mid-year last year. Um, I feel like this is a sneaky matchup where, Rocker could come in and pull out the upset. I'm going to pick Optic, expecting Optic to be Optic and take care of business here. But yeah, this we kind of been saying it, like wouldn't be surprised if X team beat Y team. But this is truly one where like I'm picking Optic, and if Rocker did pull off an upset, it's definitely an upset. But I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh wow, I'm super surprised. I could see it happening, but it's just going to be a matter of what Rocker shows up, how well prepared they are, all that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Optic will end up taking this, but Minnesota, they're one of the few teams that didn't make a roster change heading into the season. And I think they were really starting to peak at the beginning of last year with the last major championship. They obviously had that incredible comeback against Toronto. Um, and I think they did relatively well at champs, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so I feel like they were just kind of approaching their true potential as a team, and maybe we'll get to see that now. Obviously, it's a different game. Like Vanguard doesn't play the same as Cold War, but I think chemistry at least should be there because it's the same roster, just like FaZe and Toronto. They're going into the season and they're used to the people that they're playing next to, and especially in a tournament or in this case in like a single match format. So I think that Minnesota is in a good spot, and I'm very excited to see how well they do this year because this is they've had like very weird seasons. The organization, like that first year going online, really screwed them, and they fell off a cliff essentially. And then last year they were kind of middle of the road for most of the season, and then had the incredible run at the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to Minnesota, but I'm gonna stick with Optic on this one. Um,
Sounds good to me.
let's talk about some like end of season predictions because I believe we did this for last year, but I can't remember exactly if we did it or if we kind of just pulled it out like later in the season. But I want to talk about who we think might be say the champions of the league, or who we think might be the MVP. So if you want me to go first, I can, but so we're gonna give predictions for 4 categories, and I guess the last one's not really a category, but the first one is who will win the 2022 Call of Duty League Championship, and number 2, who will win the CDL MVP, the season MVP, not champs MVP. Who will be the CDL Rookie of the Year? That's more of a personal thing because the CDL doesn't hand out a specific Rookie of the Year. And then the last one is who is the first team that is going to make a roster change this season? I know we did that one last year because I picked Paris, and I don't know if I was correct on that, but I remember doing the prediction. So let's start at the top. Who do you think will win the 2022 CDL championship?
You want me to go first or no? I don't want to say the same team as you.
I mean, I think we might say the same team. Like, if you're worried about that, I will go first and I'll say Atlanta. And because I mean, 2 years in a row is very difficult, as we know. Not a lot of players and definitely not a lot of teams are able to pull off 2 consecutive championships, but I think Atlanta is capable of it. So I will say the Atlanta Phase are going to be the 2022 CDL champions.
All right.
Was that your pick?
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard not to pick
Yeah.
Atlanta, but yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I'm not gonna say the same thing as you because that'd be boring. Um, it'd also be kind of boring if I just picked Optic or Toronto too.
Paris
Um,
is winning champs? Question mark.
question mark. Um, I'm gonna go just super out on a limb and pick New York.
I mean, it.
Clay and Krim
Yeah,
getting the fourth ring. That'd be super cool.
yeah.
Um, that's gonna be. We're probably gonna look back on this pick later in the year, and I am not gonna look like Nostradamus, but um, yeah, I'm not gonna go. If I'm not, I obviously I think the heavy favorite is FaZe. If I had to pick a single team, it would be FaZe. For the sake of being different, though, I will. I'll just go with New York.
I think
I
that's
think
a
it's
good
an
pick.
interesting pick.
That
Yeah.
would be the storylines at least of Krim and Clay winning their fourth, and Neptune and Hydra, both really young players, winning their first. And yeah, that'd be a very cool moment for the CDL. Let's talk about the league MVP. We were discussing the league MVP pretty much for the back half of the season last year, where uh, we were inconsistent. We agreed that it was either going to be a Beezy or Simp because they were just kind of being ridiculous. And I believe at the end of the year, you kind of just picked a Beezy just to be different to make sure that we didn't both say Simp, but we both agreed that they should be the top two candidates. Um, so you go first on this one since I went first on the last one. So who is going to be the 2022 CDL League MVP?
You stole my thunder a little bit, but I'm gonna go with a BZ. Regardless of whether you would pick Simp or not, I'm picking a BZ. Just like you kind of said, I was kind of on that train last year, thinking he's a super high impact player. If if you look at if you don't look at the stats, and just think about like how irreplaceable a BZ is from like that entry frags. I don't even know exactly how to classify him, but there's not a lot of guys who are as aggressive and being that guy who just head smashes into objectives and picks up three pieces as consistently as him. I think he is the most valuable player in that sense because it's hard to find another BZ. Um, so yeah, I think right now, based on Vanguard in its current state, um, I just think the MP40 is a super good gun. So I feel like the MVP, assume if Vanguard stays like this and the MP40 doesn't get nerfed or anything like that, I feel like an SMG player is in a good position to win MVP again, similar to we had the 74U last year. MP5 and MW just seems like a running trend at this point. But regardless of that, I'm going with a BZ. He's my MVP.
So I was actually going to pick a BZ as well because I I thought very similarly to you that being an SMG player and being like a hyper aggressive SMG player like he is would fit really well. And I don't know if voters will, like, if it comes down to another situation where Simp and Abizi are at the top and they're both very instrumental in their team success. I don't know if voters would pick Simp again. Just kind of my thought process in it. I also think outside of Simp and Abizi, Dashy might have a really good shot. I think with this current roster with Optic, he could be a really good pick to kind of just drop incredible numbers, and I expect them to be pretty good in the league. So I think he is I don't know if a dark horse, but more just like an outside shot. But I'll say Simp just to be complete and
Yeah, we
because
cover our bases. Have a
yeah
good shot at being right.
yeah yeah if you're gonna put any bets down on these, I think that Abizi or Simp would be good bets to place. Let's talk about the rookie of the year. So, like I said, this is not an official award that the CDL gives out, but this is something that we've talked about for years, and everybody always talks about it. About like who is the best first year player, and I guess they don't need to technically be in their first year. Like if you came in at the very end of last season and didn't get to really play at all, I think you would count. But there are quite a few rookies this season. I don't have a list in front of me, and I probably should, but
I got you.
I know there are quite a few rookies because I saw Crone's tweet about how there are like more rookies this season to start the year than last season and stuff. So if you have a list, then that's great.
We have 7
Okay.
rookies to start the year. It is worth noting last year, um, although like you said, there wasn't like a CDL official rookie of the year. The consensus rookie of the year within the community at least was Insight. And as we touched on earlier in the show, Insight didn't come in until stage 2. So it's very possible we have another situation like that where the unofficial rookie of the year for this season isn't even starting the season in the CDL. It could be a challengers player. But right now, at the start of the season, the 7 rookies we have are Dave Patty on Florida, Gizmo and Nasty on London, Capsidal and Nero on Boston, and then Sib and Pred on Seattle.
Okay. So I'm not going to pick anybody that's on a team that I don't think will be good because that's just not smart. Uh, so out of these four, like the top four right now that I'm thinking of are Capsidal, Nero, Sib, and Pred because I think Boston would be good enough to keep them in the top, and then Seattle will. I mean, they might be really good, and so yeah, those are my final four. I need a little more time to think about it. If you have one in mind that you're thinking rookie of the year or something outside of the CDL.
Yeah, I really it's tough. Um I'm trying to think of challengers off the top of my head. I feel like at least in North America, like a lot of these top challengers teams right now are mostly like former pros who I wouldn't consider rookies if they actually, were picked up at some point. Like, you look at the first team that comes to mind to me is the Assault Classic Shawnee and Exceed team. Like all of the even Exceed has minimal experience in the CDL. Like I wouldn't classify any of them as rookies if they were picked up mid season. So it's tough. I don't really know. I feel like it's gonna be interesting to see if any of these teams, if there's like another diamond in the rough, kind of like Capsidal. Like I feel like Capsidal just sort of came out of nowhere. Uh, this off season and is now picked up, and we saw him go on that nasty spree against New York in the Kickoff Classic. There's a lot of hype around him, but again, I think kind of like what you said, you have to pick somebody on a strong team. And right now, out of the teams with the rookies, it feels like Seattle is the best team. So and based on individual performance, Sib and Pred both looked really strong. So I don't think it's necessarily a wild pick to go with either of them. I am just going to go with Sib. I feel like that's a very safe pick right now, at least. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, so out of the challengers players, I think that like Proloot and Mohawk and Spart, like Spart is on a CDL roster, he's on LAG as their substitute.
He even played in MW, so I
Yeah,
really wouldn't. Yeah.
but I think Proloot and Mohawk specifically because
Yep.
they've performed really well throughout like the last like year and a half in challengers. I would be really surprised if they don't end up on a CDL roster at some point this season. There's always like by just like logic, there has to be a few teams that underperform or don't perform like well, and usually those teams end up making changes and bring in challengers players. So I want to say Proloot, but I'm gonna end up going with an actual CDL player because it's just kind of unpredictable about what challengers players actually get picked up, and I'll say Pred. Um, Pred is, I mean, he looks to be really good, and like he is. I don't know if he's unknown per se, because just because he's unknown to me doesn't mean that he's unknown to the the you know, like the actual fans and the all of the people that are watching the CDL. But coming from APAC and being really the only APAC player to get out and to get a shot at the CDL this year, he seems to be on a good team. I think that they have a good system around them, around him specifically. I would say that Pred probably gets Rookie of the Year, but really it is the hardest thing to predict because you don't really know how these teams will deal with roster changes. Because if they're like the Thieves last year, like I mean, there could be dozens of new players coming into the league, and I fully expect multiple more challengers players to get their shot this year and kind of try to prove that they're deserving of a CDL spot.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so I have Pred, you have Sib for Rookie of the Year. And finally, we have the first team to make a roster change. So I don't think it'll be Optic. I don't think it'll be FaZe. So who do you have as the first team to make a roster change?
Do you want me to go? Because I think my answer is kind of
Yeah, you can go.
okay. I'm gonna say London, just because one, we know they have a sub already in Harry, who is another um like amateur player from the European scene, and although they have multiple young European players on their team now, they could, if they struggle early in the season, they could be that first team to give him a shot. So I feel like that's a super safe answer. And that's also based on London's propensity last year to make multiple roster changes, whether it was because of performance or visa issues, whatnot. It's just London has made a lot of changes in the past. And I believe they technically were the first team last year because of Parasite having to fill in. So I feel like London is the safest answer right now.
Yeah, I I think London is a good answer because, like you said, they actually have a substitute that isn't a coach or an analyst or whatever. For a similar reason, I'm going to go with Florida because they actually have Yeez on their roster, and he is someone that was actually on their roster last season as a substitute. And I think that they actually think highly of him. He's not like I won't name names, but I don't think he's one of those players that is being kept on a roster because like they like him, like they like his personality and they're just kind of keeping a former CDL player on the roster. So I think Yeez is actually I think he has a good chance of playing, especially if these roles don't work out for Florida and they need to make a change. I don't know who would be the odd man out. I mean, like I would think
That was my follow up for you.
yeah, I would think Dave Patty, just like because he was the odd pick to go into the roster in the first place. But we've seen in the past like that's not necessarily the case when the changes are made because it all depends on like how the team will affect the chemistry and I just don't know. I think Dave Patty, but really it could be any of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
If things go poorly, if it's not going poorly, then they're gonna keep it and just kind of try to ride it out. But Florida have been, I think the past 2 seasons have made those roster changes, even after seeing success, like we saw with like early in the 2020 season, where they ended up benching Pristini for or for Pharaoh, I
Fair.
think,
Yeah.
and then I think they even then benched Mox for Big Wake. So they're kind of open to making these changes, and Ogre Two has done really well by making these changes. So I'm gonna go with Florida, but I think London is a good pick as well.
I think Florida is a really good answer, and I think depending on how we word this question, Florida technically might have been the correct answer for last year because they made that swap for Neptune, but that was before the season actually started. So then you get into whether you count that as an off-season move or, you know, an actual season move because it was after the game came out, but the CDL hadn't started yet. So regardless, I think those are two good answers from both of us there. Um, and I'm looking forward to seeing us both be proven wrong and some other team making a change that we're not expecting, but will be something we talk about later on down the road.
Yeah, it'll be surprising if it's another team because of the substitute situation, but I mean, we've been surprised in both of the previous seasons of the CDL, so there's really no reason to think that we won't be surprised this year. And the last bit of news that we have is about Aches, two-time world champion. We got to actually witness one of his world championships in person when he and Evil Geniuses won the World War II Call of Duty World League Championship. He announced his retirement from competitive Call of Duty. This was kind of unofficially. He was already retired because he wasn't competing anymore, and I mean, he was more so just a community figure, which we see that all the time, where there isn't an official announcement by some players, but they just kind of fade away from the actual competitive side of things and are more just so on Twitter and doing their own thing. And so he officially announced his retirement. He has a pretty cool statement. If you go to his Twitter, twitter.com/aches. So he announced his retirement and he said that he's accepted a position to go full-time on the dev team as a game designer with esports in mind. So he didn't really give any specifics on what or like, you know, where he's going to be, but he's also going to be the co-host of The Flank this year with Zuma. I think Ben has taken a step back with that stuff and focusing on his full-time job. And then Aches also said that he is going to be a new member of the talent lineup for Dexerto's reverse sweep this year. So he's doing a lot in competitive Call of Duty, and it seems like he's doing something else with esports in mind, whatever that may be. But yeah, it's a pretty cool announcement for Aches. At least he will continue to be in the community, which is the main thing. What do you think of Aches, his retirement? Obviously, we're both big fans. So what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, just congratulations, Patty P, for an incredible career. Like you said, he's been one of my favorite players personally, basically since I started following Call of Duty. Um, and he was always one of the players throughout all the events I attended in years past. It was super fun to interview. He, gave great answers and it was very. I don't know if talkable is the right word, but he was a good guy to talk to for interviews, and even just talking to in the press room when you weren't interviewing him. Just a really good guy, super fierce competitor, very smart player. Um, Shout out to him. Another legend for me in particular, and you too. Just another legend from those early days of Call of Duty is hanging up the sticks. But like you mentioned with the game designer stuff, we don't know too much. What is it actually? Oh, game designer is what he said. Okay. Um, but with esports in mind, um, that's something that jumps out right away to me. Like I was just saying, he's known throughout his career for being a smart player. He was also very outspoken about what needed to be fixed in Call of Duty in particular and in competitive. So hearing that he's going to be working on any game with esports in mind, that immediately piques my interest. Obviously, we don't know what the game is or anything like that, but whenever those details get revealed or whatever happens down the road, if there's an esports title that comes out with Patty P involved in it in any capacity, it's definitely something I'm going to check out down the road. Um, but yeah, just shout out Patty P, I guess.
Yeah, like I mean, I've said it before on the podcast, but uh, I started watching in 2013, competitive Call of Duty. I started watching in 2013, and shortly thereafter, I became a really big Complexity fan because I gravitated towards like, especially Aches, but the entire team, just the confidence that they exuded. And now that I think about it, we just had Parasite announced his retirement a few weeks ago, and that means that no Impact players are currently competing. And with Aches' retirement, the only, it depends on which part of complexity you're talking about. If you're talking about the original complexity dynasty with Clayster and Krim are the only two players on that team that are remaining. And if you count the Karma one, then only Crim6 is remaining. So that complexity dynasty that I thought would never be topped, and in my mind might not be topped anyway. They are still kicking, but it's really sad to see Aches go from as a competitor because he's like a true villain. At least if you're an Optic fan or whatever, where he'd get in your face. He might get pushed by Nade Shot at an event because he's talking a little bit of trash. But that's just like who he is, and he's always been outspoken. He's never been afraid to speak his mind, and that's why I'm really glad that he's going to be the co-host of The Flank with Zuma, because the community needs takes like his, even if he might offend people or rub them the wrong way or whatever. I think that he's always honest at his core, and that it's always a good thing when he's talking about Call of Duty because he has more knowledge about the scene and the history of Call of Duty esports than almost anybody in the scene. So it's awesome to see that he's not just going away and we'll never see him again. We're obviously going to get a lot of content from him, and who knows about this game, if it'll be a success and we'll end up playing it, and maybe we'll even start a podcast about it. Who knows? But yeah, that's Aches' retirement.
Yep. Shout out Patty P. Thanks for all the memories over the years, and congrats on a great career and good luck moving forward.
Yep. But that's it for today's episode. Unless you have anything that you wanted to talk about. But yeah, so if you don't have anything, let's wrap up the show. Make sure to subscribe or follow to the Ego Chall podcast feed on whatever platform you are listening or watching on. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much every other major podcasting platform. Also, please give us a good rating, 5 stars preferably, on Apple Podcasts, and leave your feedback if you're so inclined. Follow us on Twitter. You're at jbink with 2Ks. I'm at presbyers, and the podcast official Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. Although now that the season is ready to start, we're planning on keeping an actual schedule because it's not the off season anymore. We actually have content that keeps coming in, and we can talk about the matches and everything. Although we plan to stick to a schedule, it's best just to follow us on Twitter and make sure that you know when the next podcast episode is coming and when we're going to go live with it and everything. And lastly, if you're a fan of the show and you want even more Call of Duty esports or Call of Duty League content, check out .esports.com. Bink and I are editors there. We have the best esports news, analysis, and opinions on that site. So make sure to go look at .esports.com. That's it for me. Take it away, Bink.
Yep. Short and sweet. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Looking forward to the season officially kicking off. And, now it's Wednesday on the East Coast, so we're 2 days away. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember to send the chow.